Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
It should have been a good day, a clean day, the kind where you pull into the driveway and the air smells like cut grass and cheap charcoal, and people laugh too loud over cold beers. I parked across the street, sat there with the diamond necklace burning a hole in my jacket pocket, thinking how proud my mom would be when she opened that little black box. 41 years old, and I still craved that look in her eyes like I was a damn 10-year-old bringing home a crayon drawing from school. I don't know if you ever outgrow that feeling, needing your mother to finally say out loud that you're enough. The house hadn't changed, not one damn bit. Same peeling white paint, same crooked mailbox with the little plastic eagle still hanging on for dear life. Inside, the living room buzzed with chatter and the clink of cheap wine glasses. Cousins, aunts, neighbors who never had the decency to mind their own business, they were all there, piling plates high with food, talking about weather, politics, grandchildren, divorces, and Lord knows what else. And there she was, in the middle of it all, my mother, Margaret Carter, turning 60 years old and wearing the same blue floral dress she wore to my high school graduation. I made my way through the crowd, forcing smiles, slapping backs, and finally stood in front of her, clearing my throat like a jackass. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, pulling out the tiny box like it weighed 100 pounds. She looked up at me, her face breaking into a soft smile that did something painful inside my chest. She reached out, hands trembling a little, and opened the box. The diamond necklace caught the overhead light, throwing little rainbows onto the walls, and the whole room leaned in, murmuring in approval. It was not just expensive, it was meaningful, at least to me. It meant all those nights I worked late, all those birthdays I missed, all the blood and sweat poured into something real. Then Ben cleared his throat behind me, holding something wrapped in brown paper and twine, looking like some damn farmer delivering eggs. "This is from me," he said, his voice soft but sure. Mom smiled even wider and took it from him, carefully unwrapping it like it was some sacred thing. Inside was a battered, homemade scrapbook, the kind you might make in 3rd grade if your teacher was feeling particularly cruel. Page after page filled with photographs, little notes scribbled in Ben's chicken scratch handwriting. Memories. Vacations, Christmas mornings, lazy Sundays on the couch. Every damn moment I missed because I was too busy chasing the next promotion, the next paycheck, the next big thing. My stomach twisted as she flipped through it, laughing and gasping and wiping at her eyes like she'd been handed the Holy Grail. Then she held it up, her voice cracking just enough to sound dramatic. "This," she said, smiling around at everyone like a queen handing out favors, "this is real love. Not whatever you're trying to buy." She didn't even glance at the necklace. Not once. The words hit me so hard I swayed, where I stood, like someone had punched me straight in the gut and then twisted the knife for good measure. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that cracked through the room like a gunshot. Without thinking, without even looking at her, I reached forward, grabbed the necklace box out of her lap, and slipped it back into my jacket pocket. "Perfect," I said, my voice low but clear enough for every miserable person in that house to hear. "I'll just give it to the woman who raised me instead." The room went dead silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Someone cleared their throat awkwardly. A fork clattered onto a plate. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, her face draining of color. Ben stepped forward like he was gonna say something heroic, but even he looked too stunned to move. "And hey Race, where I want to ask you something, really think about it before you answer. Is love measured by the size of the gesture, or by the number of memories you stack up over the years? Can you buy a little forgiveness, a little pride, if you've missed too much along the way?" I didn't stay for the cake. I didn't stay for the bullshit speeches or the watered-down beer or the sideways glances from people who never gave a damn about me except to whisper about my failures behind my back. I walked out that door, my boots hitting the porch steps like gunfire, climbed into my car, and drove away without looking back. The necklace sat heavy in my pocket the whole drive home, digging into my ribs like a sharp reminder of how you can have all the money in the world and still be the poorest son of a bitch in the room. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the radio playing some old country song about heartbreak and broken dreams, because of course it did, because the universe loves to kick you when you're already down. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned the color of dirty steel, heavy and bruised-looking, like it might crack open and dump the ocean right on top of me. I sat there for a long time, the necklace still in my pocket, wondering if I'd done the right thing or if I'd just burned the last bridge I had without realizing how far the fall would be. But deep down, under all the anger and humiliation, there was a cold, stubborn part of me that whispered, no. No regrets. She made her choice. She picked the scrapbook. She picked Ben. She picked the safe, easy memories over the bloody, messy sacrifices she never even saw. And maybe, just maybe, that told me everything I needed to know about where I really stood. Because love, real love, doesn't need to be cheap. It needs to be noticed. And mine sure as hell wasn't. I spent the whole night tossing and turning in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling like it might start offering me answers if I looked hard enough, but of course it never did. Sleep wouldn't come, not because I wasn't tired, but because my mind kept running back over everything, dragging up old memories like junk rising from the bottom of a swamp. That necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry, and it sure as hell wasn't about showing off, no matter what it must have looked like to her. It was a symbol, a receipt, a quiet, desperate way of saying, look what I did, Mom. Look at what I became. When I was 17, I stood in the backyard under the busted porch light and made myself a promise that someday I would be the son she could finally brag about without making excuses first. I remember it like it was yesterday, the way the light flickered and buzzed, the smell of damp earth and cut grass in the air, the weight of everything I thought I wasn't but swore I would be. That was the night she missed my senior awards ceremony because she was working overtime at the diner, and Ben sat there clapping by himself while I smiled like it didn't hurt like hell. Later, when she came home and apologized, exhausted and smelling like fry grease, I told her it was no big deal, but inside I made a vow so fierce it felt like my ribs could barely hold it. I started working that summer, every job I could find, mowing lawns, stocking shelves at the hardware store, flipping burgers until my fingers blistered. I missed parties, missed dates, missed every stupid thing teenagers were supposed to waste their time on, because all I could see was that porch light and that tired look on my mom's face when she said, I wish I could have been there, honey. I wanted to make it so she never had to wish again. I wanted to stack enough victories that missing a few wouldn't matter because I'd drown her in reasons to be proud. When college came around, I didn't have a trust fund or a savings account waiting for me, just a tiny scholarship and a whole lot of student loans with my name on them. I took night classes and worked double shifts hauling boxes at a warehouse, the kind of job that grinds your bones down to dust by the end of the week. Every paycheck was split 3 ways, a sliver for rent, a sliver for food, and the biggest slice straight back into tuition. Some nights, I ate canned ravioli straight from the tin, sitting in my freezing apartment with a busted heater and a neighbor who screamed at her boyfriend through paper-thin walls, but I told myself it was worth it. It would all be worth it when I could finally look her in the eye and say, see? I did it. Years later, when I finally landed my first real job, when I bought my first crappy used car, when I paid off my last dollar of debt, it wasn't for me. It was all for that 17-year-old kid standing under a broken porch light, swearing he wouldn't let his mother down. Every late night at the office, every missed vacation, every sacrificed relationship, it all fed into that same old hunger, that same stupid ache to be enough. So when I saw that necklace in the window 6 months before her 60th birthday, something inside me just stopped. I stood there, staring at it like it was some kind of holy relic, imagining the way her face would light up when she saw it, the way her voice would catch when she told her friends that her son bought it for her. It wasn't just jewelry. It was years of silent apologies wrapped in gold and diamonds, every late birthday card, every missed Thanksgiving, every phone call I let go to voicemail because I was too busy, all packed into that one stupid little box. I worked extra hours for months to pay for it without dipping into my savings. I skipped weekends out with friends, canceled a vacation I had been planning for 2 years, wore the same 2 shirts to work because I refused to spend an extra dime until that necklace was fully mine. It became this talisman, this secret hope I carried with me through the long gray days when everything felt too heavy and pointless. I could see the moment play out in my head 1,000 times. The gasp of surprise, the tears, the way she'd clutch it to her chest and say, "You didn't have to do this, Ethan," but secretly she would be so proud. But that's not how real life works, is it? Real life doesn't give a damn about the stories you build in your head. Real life is messy and cruel and stubborn. Real life hands you a battered scrapbook made by your little brother and watches you choke on your own stupid dreams. Real life watches you standing there like a fool, necklace in hand, wondering how you got it so wrong again after all these years. I guess that's the thing they never tell you about trying to buy someone's love. It doesn't matter how hard you worked for the money or how pure your intentions were. All that matters is whether they needed what you were selling. And maybe Mom didn't need a diamond necklace. Maybe she just needed me to show up all those times I thought it was okay to miss, because someday I'd make it up to her. But damn it, I thought I had. I thought this was the big moment. I thought this was the victory lap where I could finally stop running and just be the son she deserved. Instead, I ended up looking like some shallow jerk trying to buy her affection, like some stranger who didn't even know what her heart wanted after all these years. Sitting there in my dark living room, the necklace still sitting heavy in my jacket pocket like a piece of lead, I realized something that made my stomach twist in ways I didn't know it could. Maybe I didn't really know her at all. Maybe the woman I thought I was fighting so hard for wasn't even the woman sitting in that living room laughing over a scrapbook full of moments I barely recognized. And if that was true, if I had spent my whole damn life chasing the approval of a ghost, what the hell was I supposed to do now? I spent most of Sunday driving around town with nowhere to be, just circling the same cracked streets and peeling storefronts like a ghost chasing his own shadow, trying to figure out where it all went sideways. It would have been easy, real easy, to just blame it all on that one moment with the scrapbook, but the truth is that kind of heartbreak doesn't happen in an instant, no sir. It builds slowly. One small crack at a time until the whole damn thing collapses on top of you without warning. Somewhere along the way, between growing up poor and growing up proud, something in me got stuck, and if I was honest with myself, brutally, painfully honest, a lot of that had to do with Ben. Ben was 2 years younger than me, but it never really felt that way when we were kids, probably because he was always softer around the edges, always the one who needed a little more, asked for a little more, and somehow, without even trying, got it. While I was out mowing lawns and scraping together change for a busted bike chain, Ben was inside, helping Mom fold laundry or sitting on the kitchen counter telling her about his day. It was not that he was lazy or spoiled. Exactly, it was just that life seemed to bend for him a little easier, like a road clearing itself without him even asking. I used to tell myself that Mom just felt sorry for him because he was smaller, quieter, needed more protection. It made it easier to swallow back the bitterness when she went to his Little League games but missed my track meets, or when she beamed proudly over a C- report card because Ben tried so hard but barely blinked when I brought home straight as like it was no big deal. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that being the dependable one, the strong one, would pay off in the long run. I kept telling myself love wasn't a damn competition, but somehow it always felt like I was losing anyway. Ben never left town the way I did. After high school, he bounced around a few jobs, never really finding his footing, always back under Mom's roof when rent got too tight or when another relationship fell apart. He helped around the house, sure, fixed the sink when it broke, mowed the lawn without being asked, drove Mom to her doctor appointments when her knees started going bad. In the eyes of the family and hell, maybe even in her eyes, Ben was the good son. The loyal son. The one who stayed. Meanwhile, I was out there busting my ass in the real world, sending Christmas cards with pictures of skyline views and company parties, thinking that was enough to prove my worth. I thought success would be the bridge back home, but every promotion, every new car, every pay raise just seemed to stretch that distance even wider, like it was proof that I didn't belong with them anymore. Every time I came back for Thanksgiving or Easter, I could feel it in the way conversations shifted when I walked into the room, like they didn't quite know what to say to me now. Like I had become a tourist in my own family. And Ben, well, Ben just kept racking up all those tiny invisible victories that money can't buy. Being there for the birthdays I missed. Helping Mom pick out a new couch when the old one finally gave up. Bringing her soup when she caught the flu. Things so small you might laugh at them if you wrote them down, but piled together, they built something solid, something real, something my diamond necklace could never compete with. Maybe that's the part that stung the most, the part one didn't want to admit even to myself. Ben never had to try. He never made a big show of loyalty or sacrifice. He just was there, in all the ways that matter and none of the ways that get written into speeches or remembered at retirement parties. And in the end, that was what Mom valued most. Not the grand gestures. Not the expensive gifts. Just being there. Sitting in the parking lot of the old high school where Ben and I both learned to drive, I stared at the empty football field and wondered how two kids raised under the same leaky roof could end up so different. I had spent my whole life sprinting away from the smallness of our beginnings, terrified that staying would mean failing, while Ben had stood still, built roots so deep that even failure couldn't shake him loose. And maybe, just maybe, Mom loved him more because of it. Or maybe she didn't love him more. Maybe she just loved him easier. Maybe loving me had always been a little harder, a little heavier, weighed down by expectations and disappointments that neither of us ever had the guts to talk about. Maybe when she looked at Ben, she saw comfort, familiarity, the safe choice. And maybe when she looked at me, she saw everything she had given up and everything she had failed to reach for. I didn't want to hate Ben. God knows I tried not to. It wasn't his fault he was the one who stayed, any more than it was my fault I was the one who left. But somewhere deep down, some ugly little part of me did resent him, not just for being the favorite. If I was honest, it wasn't even about favoritism anymore, but forgetting to be the one who wasn't a constant disappointment. When I finally pulled back into my driveway that night, the streetlights flickering overhead like dying stars, I realized that I could not just walk away from this. The party might have ended, the cake might have been cut and packed away in Tupperware, but the real mess was just beginning. The real story wasn't about a necklace or a scrapbook or even a birthday party. The real story was about years of small, silent betrayals, about all the things we never said and probably never would. And somehow, someway, I knew deep in my bones that I was going to have to face it. All of it. Ben, Mom, the aching hollow space between us that no amount of money or memories could fill. Because you can drive all night, you can run your whole life, but you cannot outrun the truth forever. It always catches up. The scrapbook sat on my kitchen table for almost 3 full days before I finally found the nerve to open it, mocking me every time I walked past like some battered little relic from a life I had barely touched. A reminder of all the things I thought I could make up for with a paycheck or a holiday visit. It had been left behind, whether by accident or cruel design, when Mom and Ben packed up after the party, and for reasons I could not explain to myself, I didn't throw it in the trash or shove it into a drawer. No, I left it sitting right there, front and center, like some kind of damn altar to everything I had gotten wrong. I poured myself a whiskey, the cheap stuff, the kind that burns going down and doesn't numb anything the way you hope it will, and I sat there staring at that brown paper cover tied up with twine, wondering how much damage a few pieces of paper could really do. It turns out the answer is a lot, maybe more than a bullet or a knife, because photographs don't just show you what happened, they show you where you were not, what you missed, who you could have been if only you had tried harder or stayed longer. The first page was simple enough, a photo of me and Ben when we were little, sitting on the porch steps with our bare feet dirty and our arms around each other's shoulders, smiling wide and clueless like the world was some endless summer afternoon. That one didn't hurt too bad, more like a dull ache, a reminder of a time before we both started carving up our own separate corners of life. I almost smiled at it, almost let myself feel something soft. But it got worse, as I should have known it would. Picture after picture, page after page, told the story of a family that kept living even when I wasn't looking. Ben's high school graduation, with Mom beaming at him in a way I couldn't ever quite remember her looking at me. Christmas mornings with ugly sweaters and piles of cheap, cheerful presents. 4th of July cookouts where Ben held a baby cousin I barely knew existed. Sunday dinners, hospital visits, birthdays, funerals, all those little moments that stitch a family together like thread through a wound, tight and permanent. And me? I wasn't in most of them. Maybe one photo here or there, usually blurry and rushed, a ghost slipping in from the edges only to disappear again. Smiling stiffly, holding a beer, looking at my watch like I had somewhere better to be. I could almost hear the whisper of time sliding past my ears, mocking me for every excuse I had ever made, every meeting I stayed late for, every flight I rescheduled until it wasn't worth taking anymore. Halfway through the book, my hands were shaking so bad I had to put the glass down before I shattered it. It wasn't just guilt anymore, though there was plenty of that. It was anger too, a deep, ugly, festering kind of anger that wanted to lash out and break something just to prove I could still feel something sharper than regret. Anger at Ben, for staying and being the hero without ever having to sweat for it. Anger at Mom, for making it so clear that my sacrifices were invisible to her, forgotten, tossed aside like yesterday's junk mail. But mostly, if I was being real, anger at myself. I could have come home more. I could have picked up the damn phone instead of sending another apologetic text. I could have taken the weekend off instead of chasing one more deal, one more handshake, one more meaningless title after my name. I told myself I was building a life for us all, that someday it would be worth it, that all the missed birthdays and broken promises would add up to something she could hold on to and be proud of. And here it was, the truth staring me in the face. She didn't need any of it. She never wanted the big house, or the shiny cars, or the designer handbags. She just wanted someone to sit with her on the couch and eat burnt cookies at Christmas, to help her drag the trash cans to the curb when her back gave out, to be there not in spirit or in theory, but in flesh and blood, every ordinary, beautiful, boring day. The scrapbook was death by 1,000 cuts, and by the time I closed the cover and shoved it across the table like it might bite me, I felt hollowed out, scraped raw in ways I didn't even know were possible. No speech, no apology, no necklace in the world could glue those pieces back together. I sat there in the dim light, the house too quiet around me, and thought about all the ways you can lose someone without even realizing it, not with a big explosion or a betrayal, but slowly, steadily. Through neglect and distraction and 1,000 tiny selfish choices you never even noticed at the time. I thought about Ben, still living 2 streets over from Mom, probably fixing her leaky sink tomorrow without thinking twice about it. I thought about the look on her face when she held up that scrapbook, that soft, shining pride that had nothing to do with money or ambition or sacrifice, and everything to do with the simple fact that Ben had been there. And I thought about myself, sitting alone in a house filled with nice things that didn't mean a damn thing, clutching a necklace that no one wanted, with nobody to blame but myself. It was a bitter, ugly truth, but there it was. No one had taken anything from me. I had given it all away, piece by piece, and now here I was, trying to buy it all back with a string of diamonds and a desperate hope that it wasn't too late. But deep down, I already knew better. Sometimes, too late is just too damn late. In the days after the party, the silence grew thicker than the summer heat that hung over the town, wrapping everything in a heavy, sticky stillness that no amount of air conditioning or cold beer could chase away. At first, I told myself it was fine, that I needed the space anyway, that after what happened, No one would expect me to come crawling back with my tail between my legs. But as the hours dragged on, turning into days and then almost a week, it became painfully clear that space was not the punishment I had imagined. It was exile, pure and simple, and I was the only one who seemed to notice or care. My phone sat dead on the kitchen counter, untouched, the screen dark and accusing, like a window into a party I had not been invited to. No missed calls. No texts. No casual, "Hey, how are you holding up?" from Ben or a guilt-ridden check-in from Mom. It was as if I had been cut out of the family group photo with a pair of dull scissors, leaving only a jagged hole where I used to stand. I wondered if they were sitting around her living room, passing around leftovers and inside jokes, shaking their heads about me and the spectacle I had made, comforting themselves with the belief that they had done everything right while I had somehow, once again, found a way to screw it all up. The first few days I wore my anger like a shield, walking around the house, slamming cabinet doors, turning the TV volume up too loud just to drown out the silence that pressed against my ears like a scream I couldn't hear. I convinced myself that I didn't care, that they didn't deserve an apology, that if they couldn't see the years of sacrifices written into the lines on my face, then to hell with them all. Pride is a funny thing. It tastes bitter on the way down but feels like armor when you are too wounded to admit you might need someone else to help carry the weight. But pride doesn't keep you warm at night, and by the fifth day, the anger started to crumble around the edges, leaving behind something uglier and harder to ignore: doubt. What if I had been wrong? What if, in my rush to defend myself, to strike back before anyone else could land a punch, I had just proven every terrible thing they might already believe about me? That I was selfish. That I was out of touch. That I didn't understand the simple, quiet kind of love that doesn't come with a price tag. I found myself standing in the hallway, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Mom's name in my contacts, staring at that picture of her smiling at some long-forgotten Christmas, back before things got so complicated, so sharp and heavy between us. I could call her. I could apologize. I could tell her the truth, that the necklace wasn't about buying her love. It was about offering proof that I had never stopped wanting it. I could explain the late nights, the missed birthdays, the hollow victories that meant nothing without her blessing. But every time my thumb edged closer to the call button, a fresh wave of bitterness stopped me cold. Why should I be the one to call? Why should I be the one to crawl back, to grovel for forgiveness when they had stood there and judged me without ever once trying to understand where I was coming from? Love, real love, is supposed to cut both ways, not just sit there waiting for you to bring offerings to its feet and beg for scraps. The worst part was not the silence, though not really. The worst part was imagining the conversations I wasn't hearing, the judgments I wasn't there to defend myself against. I could picture it too easily: Ben shaking his head sadly, Mom wiping away a tear, some well-meaning aunt offering platitudes about how some people just lose their way, as if I were some runaway dog who needed pity more than respect. I could feel them closing ranks without me, rewriting the story, so that my absence was just another proof of my failure, another reason why the scrapbook mattered more than the necklace ever could. Every time the phone rang, usually telemarketers or wrong numbers, my heart leapt stupidly in my chest, only to crash down seconds later, leaving me angrier at myself than at anyone else. What was I even waiting for? An invitation to come home? An apology? Some grand gesture that would never come, because as far as they were concerned, the matter was settled, the sides were chosen, and I was the one who had walked away from the table. By Saturday night, after another long, empty day of drinking cheap whiskey and picking fights with the television, I realized I was standing at a crossroads, even if no one else could see it. I could call her, swallow my pride, apologize for the wrong things just to stitch together some version of the family I used to believe in. Or I could stay silent, stay gone, let the wound fester and scar over, build a new life that did not include family gatherings and Sunday dinners and birthday parties where I was always one laugh short, one hug too late. Neither choice felt like winning. Both tasted like losing in different ways. I stood there a long time, phone heavy in my hand, listening to the empty hum of the house settling around me like it was breathing. Maybe that was the real tragedy of it all, that love can become a kind of battlefield where no one even remembers what they were fighting for in the first place, only that it hurts too much to lay down arms. In the end, I set the phone down, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, letting the silence fill every crack and corner until it felt almost like company. Maybe tomorrow I would call. Maybe next week. Maybe never. For now, the silence would have to be enough. By the time Sunday morning rolled around, the walls of my house felt like they were pressing in closer, whispering reminders of every bad decision I had made that week, every call I didn't make, every apology I swallowed down like broken glass. I woke up restless, exhausted but wired, the kind of bone-deep unease you cannot drink away or work through, no matter how hard you try. For reasons I did not fully understand at first, my car seemed to drive itself down those old, cracked backroads toward the one place that still smelled like something pure and familiar. The one person who never seemed to need anything from me except that I show up once in a while and sit on her sagging front porch. Grandma Mildred's house sat at the far edge of town, where the pavement turned to gravel and the mailboxes leaned sideways like tired soldiers. The paint on her little white cottage peeled in long strips, and the front lawn was more weeds than grass these days, but to me, it still looked like the safest place on earth. I pulled up the driveway slow, the crunch of the tires loud in the thick morning air, half expecting to see her on the porch with her ancient cat sprawled across her lap, waving me in with that knowing little smile she always wore. Instead, I found her inside, sitting in her battered armchair by the window, knitting something ugly and colorful that would eventually become a blanket or a sweater or maybe just a lumpy scarf no one would have the heart to tell her was hideous. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes sharp as ever even if her body was starting to fail her, and she smiled, that small, tired smile that made something inside my chest crack open wider than it already was. "Well, well," she said, setting down her knitting. "Look what the cat dragged in." I laughed, or something close enough to it, and leaned down to kiss her wrinkled cheek, breathing in the familiar smells of lavender lotion and old wood, and the faintest hint of cigarette smoke, even though she quit a decade ago. I collapsed into the chair opposite her, feeling more exhausted than I had in months, like just crossing that threshold had stripped away all the armor I had spent years building up. For a while, we just sat there, the old clock on the wall ticking loud in the silence, neither of us in any rush to fill it. That was one of the things I loved most about Grandma Mildred. She never made you dance for her attention, never needed you to perform grief or joy or gratitude to earn a place in her living room. You could just be broken and battered and messy, and she would hold you there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eventually, she reached over, her fingers gnarled and trembling, and patted my knee. "You look like you've been carrying something too heavy, boy." I swallowed hard, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else, rough and scarred from years of chasing the wrong things. "It's Mom's birthday," I said finally, the words tasting bitter even as they left my mouth. Gave her a necklace. Then gave her a scrapbook. Guess which one meant more? Grandma Mildred chuckled, low and dry, like gravel rolling down a hill. "You always thought love had to be shiny, Ethan," she said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. "Thought if you stacked up enough gold and glory, you could buy your way back into people's hearts." I felt my face flush, shame and anger warring inside me so fiercely it almost made my hands shake. "I just wanted her to see me," I muttered, the confession ripping out of me before I could stop it. "To be proud. To notice." She nodded, rocking slowly in her chair, the sunlight catching the silver threads in her hair. "And maybe she did, in her own way," she said. "But honey, pride's a funny thing. It don't always look the way you want it to." I leaned back in the chair, staring up at the ceiling, feeling like the air itself was too heavy to breathe. "I gave up everything for it," I said, the words thick and sharp. "Every birthday, every Sunday dinner, every lazy afternoon that Scrapbook was made of. And it still wasn't enough." She was quiet a long moment, long enough I thought maybe she had fallen asleep. But when I looked over, her eyes were wide open, bright with something that looked too much like pity for my pride to bear. "Maybe the problem, Ethan," she said softly, "is you thinking you had to earn it at all." I blinked, not sure I had heard her right. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, her small shoulders creaking under the weight of a lifetime lived harder than I ever knew. "Real love," she said, "ain't a prize you win at the end of a hard race. It's not about the biggest gift or the grandest gesture. It's about the ugly stuff, the late-night calls when you're bone-tired, the fights you don't walk away from, the showing up when it's inconvenient and ugly and boring." I let those words sink in, let them curl around the hollow places inside me like slow-moving vines. I thought about every excuse I ever made, every time I told myself I was too busy, that there would always be more time. I thought about the scrapbook sitting on my kitchen table, fat with moments I had never bothered to make space for, because I was too busy building a life I thought would redeem me in her eyes. "You were there," I said suddenly, the truth hitting me like a fist. "When Mom was too busy, when Dad was too angry, when the whole world felt like it was folding in on itself, you were the one who showed up." Grandma Mildred smiled, soft and sad. "I didn't do anything fancy," she said. "Just made sure you knew somebody was in your corner. That's all most folks ever need." We sat there a long while after that, not speaking, just breathing the same tired air, two broken souls orbiting around a kind of love that didn't need explaining or defending. I don't know how long I stayed, only that when I finally rose to leave, the sun had dipped low in the sky, setting the whole world on fire with that soft golden light that makes everything look more beautiful than it really is. Before I walked out the door, she called after me, her voice thin but sure. "You ain't too late yet, Ethan. Long as you're breathing, you ain't too late." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and stepped out into the evening, feeling the weight of her words settle deep into my chest, right next to all the guilt and anger and hurt that I was only just starting to name. Maybe I could not fix everything. Maybe I could not go back and stitch myself into the scrapbook pages I had missed. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to show up, battered and late and imperfect, and still be counted. Maybe real love was not about being perfect at all. Maybe it was just about showing up anyway. And this time, I intended to show up. It took me another full day to gather the guts to get back into my truck, turn the key in the ignition, and point myself toward Mom's place again. My hands sweating against the steering wheel like a kid about to face the principal after pulling some stunt he already regrets. The gravel crunched under my tires louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way because my heart was pounding too hard in my chest, making everything around me seem sharper, meaner, harder than it needed to be. I sat there in the driveway for a solid 10 minutes, staring at the peeling paint on the porch railings, the cracked flower pots, the sagging gutters, wondering if there was any real point to walking through that door again. Or if I was just setting myself up for another kind of heartbreak, the slow, familiar kind that doesn't scream when it rips you apart, but slices deep all the same. The front door was unlocked, which either meant they had been expecting me or they had finally stopped caring enough to keep the world out, and somehow both possibilities stung in ways I wasn't ready for. The house smelled like old coffee and fried bacon and something faintly sweet, like someone had been baking even though it was too damn hot for an oven, and for one brief second, I was a kid again, chasing Ben through the kitchen, laughing so hard my ribs hurt, before reality slammed back down over me with the force of a sledgehammer. I found them in the living room, Mom sitting in her usual worn armchair with a blanket tucked over her knees even though it was nearly 80 degrees outside, and Ben slouched on the couch like he belonged there, like he had never left. Like he had spent the last few days filling the space I had vacated without missing a beat. Their conversation skidded to a halt the second they saw me, and an uncomfortable silence settled over the room, thick and heavy like smoke after a house fire. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly, not angry exactly, but wary, like she was bracing for another explosion, another round of words too sharp to take back. Ben shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening the way it always did when he was trying to hold his temper, and for a second, I considered just turning around and walking right back out the door, letting the silence be my final word. But then I remembered Grandma Mildred's voice in my ear, steady and sure, long as you're breathing, you ain't too late, and I made myself step further into the room, made myself sit down in the stiff-backed chair across from them like a man ready to stand trial. Nobody said anything for a long moment, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace, counting down the seconds like some cruel reminder that time keeps moving forward whether you want it to or not. Finally, it was Ben who broke the silence, his voice low and flat. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. I ignored him, turning my gaze to Mom, who looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she had at the party, like the weight of everything we had left unsaid was pressing down on her too. I came to talk, I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded rough, scraped raw by too many nights spent choking down anger and regret. Mom's mouth pressed into a thin line, and for a second, I thought she might tell me to get out, to take my necklace and my wounded pride and leave her the hell alone, but instead she just nodded once, curt and tired, and gestured for me to continue. I screwed up, I said, the words tasting like blood and broken glass as they left my mouth. Not just at the party. For a long time. Ben snorted, a bitter sound that made my fists clench instinctively against my thighs. You think, he muttered, and Mom shot him a sharp look that shut him up. But the damage was already done, the anger already lit like a match in a dry field. I thought if I worked hard enough, I continued, forcing the words out even though every part of me wanted to lash out instead. If I made enough money, climbed high enough, I could. I don't know. Make it right somehow. Make you proud. Mom's eyes softened slightly, but there was still steel in her spine, still a tired kind of hurt that no amount of diamonds could polish away. You think I needed any of that? She asked quietly, her voice shaking just enough to make my chest ache. I just wanted my boy home for dinner sometimes. I wanted to see your face, hear about your day, not get postcards and presents and long-distance promises. Her words hit harder than I expected, maybe because deep down, I had known it all along, had buried that knowledge under layers of ambition and excuses because it hurt too damn much to face it straight on. And what about him? I demanded, jerking my chin toward Ben, the bitterness boiling over before I could stop it. He gets to be the hero because he stayed? Because he never tried for anything more? Ben was on his feet before I could blink, his face flushed with fury. I stayed because someone had to, he shouted, voice cracking under the strain. Someone had to be here when she got sick, when the bills piled up, when the roof leaked. You think you're the only one who gave up something? You think running off to chase your big dreams makes you the martyr? The words slammed into me, knocking the air out of my lungs, because for the first time, I realized that maybe Ben hadn't been living the easy, comfortable life I had always imagined. Maybe staying had cost him something too, something invisible but just as real as every missed opportunity and broken dream I carried like battle scars. Mom's voice cut through the tension like a blade, sharp and shaking. Enough, she said, and we both froze, guilt slamming into us like a brick wall. This family's been breaking apart piece by piece for years, and I'm tired of pretending like it's anyone's fault but all of ours. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier, but not entirely hopeless. There was something raw and honest about it, something that felt closer to healing than anything we had managed before. I miss you, Mom said, looking straight at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But I can't keep reaching across a canyon you built. I swallowed hard, every stubborn part of me screaming to argue, to defend myself, to throw up every sacrifice and apology like a shield. But instead I nodded, slow and painful, because she was right. Maybe I had built that canyon brick by brick, thinking it would protect me, thinking it would make her proud, when really all it did was leave me standing alone on the other side, shouting into the wind. Maybe love was not about winning at all. Maybe it was about showing up broken, showing up late, showing up angry and scared and sorry, but showing up all the same. And for the first time in a long, long while, I realized that maybe I still could. The necklace sat on the passenger seat beside me, still tucked inside its little black box, shining faintly in the afternoon light like some cruel joke the universe had decided to play at my expense. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, past the old gas station where I had bought my first pack of gum with pocket change, past the baseball field where Ben had struck out 3 times in a row and still got carried off the field like a hero, past the diner where Mom had worked double shifts so many years ago, her uniform stained and her smile worn thin. Every familiar landmark felt like a needle under my skin, small stabs of memory that hurt worse because they came from a time when I had still believed you could fix things if you just tried hard enough. I thought about turning back more than once, thought about swinging by Mom's house one more time, walking up those steps and pressing the necklace into her hands whether she wanted it or not. Maybe I would tell her the truth, tell her everything I had never said about the nights I spent wondering if I was invisible, about the gnawing hunger for her approval that had shaped every goddamn decision I ever made, about how tired I was of trying to be good enough for someone who seemed to find good enough in all the places I wasn't. But every time I pictured that conversation, it ended the same way, with her looking at me not angry, not forgiving, but just sad, and somehow that sadness was worse than any fight we could have had. Instead, I kept driving, the road unraveling ahead of me like a string pulled too tight, waiting to snap. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't going back. Not today, maybe not ever. There was nothing left to say that could rewind the years we had both wasted pretending everything was fine, nothing left to trade or offer or promise that would close the distance we had both helped create. Some distances you can't cross, no matter how badly you want to, no matter how much you wish you had started building the bridge earlier when you still had the tools and the time. At a red light on the edge of town, I picked up the necklace, feeling the cool weight of it in my hand, running my thumb over the delicate chain like it was a lifeline fraying between my fingers. I thought about throwing it out the window, watching it disappear into the dust and weeds like so many of my other failures. I thought about mailing it to her, no note, no explanation, just the cold weight of what could have been, dropped into her life the same way I had dropped in and out so many times before. But in the end, I just set it back down because the truth was, the necklace wasn't for her anymore, and maybe it never had been. It was for the boy I used to be, the boy who thought love was something you could buy, earn, force into being if you just worked hard enough and hurt yourself enough in the process. The town disappeared behind me, swallowed up by the horizon, and I drove on without looking back, the road stretching out endless and uncertain ahead. I did not know where I was going, not really, and maybe that was the point. Maybe it was not about finding the right words or fixing the broken pieces anymore. Maybe it was just about learning to live with the cracks, to stop bleeding for people who could not see you were already cut wide open. Part of me hated myself for walking away, hated the thought of Mom sitting in that sagging armchair, staring out the window waiting for a son who wasn't coming home this time. Another part of me, the part that had spent too many years tying myself in knots, trying to earn a love that should have been given freely, felt something close to relief, bitter and raw, but real. Maybe walking away was selfish. Maybe it was the first honest thing I had done in years. I do not know if I did the right thing. I do not know if someday I will wake up in a strange city, older and even more broken, reaching for a phone I will not dare to call. I do not know if the hurt in Mom's eyes will ever fade, or if Ben will ever forgive me for leaving him to pick up the pieces alone once again. I do not even know if I will forgive myself. But I do know this, some gifts you give because you want to be seen, because you want to be loved, because you are so damn desperate to matter to someone that you will wrap your whole heart in a velvet box and hand it over hoping it is enough. And sometimes, the cruelest thing is not having that gift rejected, but realizing it was never what they needed in the first place. The necklace stayed in the truck, rattling around in the glove compartment, like a loose piece of a puzzle that would never fit anywhere again. Maybe someday I would find someone who would wear it, Someone who would see the meaning etched into every tiny diamond, every link of the chain. Maybe not. Maybe it would sit there forever, a quiet monument to everything I lost, everything I gave, and everything I could never quite get back. As the miles rolled under my tires and the town faded into nothing behind me, I felt the old ache settle deeper in my bones, familiar now, almost welcome. I had tried. I had failed. I had loved badly and broken things I had no idea how to fix. And somehow I was still here, breathing, driving forward into a future that looked as empty and endless as the road ahead. Maybe there were no heroes or villains in this story. Maybe there were just people, doing the best they could with what little they knew at the time, hurting each other without meaning to, loving each other in ways that were too small or too sharp or too late. Maybe that had to be enough. Maybe it was all there ever really was.